Will you marry me, Yoon-jiwoo? The question landed like a gunshot. Emilia Benson stood frozen at the entrance of the Grand Hyatt Seoul ballroom, her invitation crumpling in her trembling hand. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. And on the stage, the man who had loved her in secret for 3 years was proposing to another woman. Sang-Kyu didn't look at Emilia. Not once. He stood tall in his black tailored suit, every inch the perfect heir, his hand extended toward a woman sculpted by privilege and approval. Pale skin. Elegant smile. A future that fit his family's expectations. The room roared with celebration. Emilia felt nothing. No scream. No tears. Just a hollow silence spreading through her chest. She finally understood why he had insisted she attend tonight. This wasn't an explanation. This was a farewell. A server approached her with a champagne flute. "Ms. Benson, would you like?" "No." Her voice was calm. Too calm. She turned and walked out, heels striking marble in steady rhythm, as if her heart hadn't just been publicly executed. Behind her, Sang-Kyu smiled for the cameras. In front of her, the life she thought she was building collapsed into dust. She didn't know it yet. But that night would cost him everything. Hey besties, before we continue with this incredible story, tell me where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe and like so I can share more heart-stopping stories with you tomorrow. It is your beautiful way of supporting us. Thank you all. Love you guys. Now let's continue. The cab ride back to her apartment was a blur. Emilia stared at the Seoul skyline, all glittering lights and impossible beauty, and felt nothing. She had given Sang-Kyu 3 years. 3 years of stolen moments in private restaurants, late-night calls when he claimed to be working, weekends at his secluded villa where no one could see them. She told herself it was romance. She told herself he was protecting what they had. She was a fool. Her phone buzzed. His name lit up the screen. She declined the call. It rang again. Declined. A text message appeared. "Let me explain." There was nothing to explain. He made his choice in front of 300 witnesses and a dozen news cameras. Emilia deleted the message and blocked his number. Inside her apartment, she finally allowed herself to break. She collapsed on the couch, still in her elegant black dress, and sobbed until her ribs ached. The apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Every corner held a memory. The kitchen where he taught her to make kimchi jjigae. The balcony where they watched the sunrise after staying up all night talking. The bedroom where he whispered promises he never intended to keep. "My child will never compete for love," she whispered to the empty room, not yet knowing how prophetic those words would become. 2 weeks later, Emilia sat in her gynecologist's office in Itaewon, staring at an ultrasound image she couldn't fully process. "You're about 6 weeks along," Dr. Kim said gently. "Do you have questions?" Emilia had 1,000 questions. None of them were medical. She walked out of the clinic in a daze, the ultrasound photo tucked in her purse like a secret too heavy to carry. For one wild moment, she considered calling Sang-Kyu. Then she remembered the engagement announcement. The way he smiled at Yoon-jiwoo. The way he never once looked for Emilia in that crowd. She made her decision on the subway ride home, watching a mother with a sleeping toddler across from her. The woman looked exhausted but content. Alone but not lonely. Emilia could do this. She had to. 3 days later, she resigned from her position at the Seoul Cultural Exchange Foundation. She told her colleagues she was returning to the States for family reasons. She told her landlord she was breaking her lease early. She told no one the truth. On her last night in Seoul, Emilia stood on her empty balcony and looked out at the city that almost became her home. Somewhere out there, Sang-Kyu was preparing for his wedding. Planning his future with a woman his family approved of. Living the life that was always meant for him. "Goodbye," she said to the skyline. Then she closed the door on that chapter of her life and never looked back. The years that followed were not easy, but they were hers. Emilia returned to Chicago and rebuilt herself piece by piece. She completed her MBA at Northwestern. She gave birth to a son she named Caleb, a name that meant devotion, though she told no one to what. She poured every ounce of her heartbreak into building something that could never be taken from her: financial independence. Her consultancy firm, Benson Global Advisory, started as a one-woman operation in her apartment. Within 3 years, she had 15 employees and clients across 3 continents. Within 5 years, she opened offices in London and Johannesburg. She became the kind of woman who walked into rooms and commanded attention without saying a word. Caleb grew up watching his mother transform pain into power. He was a quiet child with unsettling intelligence and a way of observing the world that made him seem older than his years. He had Emilia's grace, but something else too, something in the sharp cut of his cheekbones, the intensity of his gaze, the way he carried himself with unconscious authority. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy?" he asked once when he was 4. "You have me," Emilia replied. "And I have you. That's our family." He never asked again. By the time Caleb turned 7, Emilia had become someone even she barely recognized from those Seoul days. She wore her success like armor: impeccable suits, perfectly styled natural hair, a calm that came from surviving what should have destroyed her. When the invitation arrived for the Global Africa-Asia Business Summit in Seoul, she stared at it for 3 full minutes. "Are you going to accept?" her assistant, Michelle, asked carefully. "Yes," Emilia said. "It's time." If you're invested in Emilia's journey, drop a like and let me know in the comments what you think she should say when she sees him again. The Grand Intercontinental Seoul was even more opulent than Emilia remembered. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from soaring ceilings. The who's who of international business mingled in the grand ballroom, champagne glasses catching the light like small promises. Emilia walked in wearing a custom emerald silk gown that draped her figure like liquid confidence. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo. Diamond studs, gifts she bought herself, glinted at her ears. Beside her, Caleb walked in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his small hand in hers. "Remember what we talked about?" Emilia murmured. "Be polite, don't wander off, and if I'm bored I can read on my tablet," Caleb recited with the solemnity of a child taking his duties seriously. "Perfect." They were announced at the entrance: Emilia Benson, CEO of Benson Global Advisory, and guest. The murmur of conversation dipped slightly as heads turned. Emilia was used to this now. She lifted her chin and walked into the crowd like she owned the room. She didn't see Sang-Kyu immediately. She was engaged in conversation with a Kenyan tech investor when she felt it, that prickling awareness of being watched. She turned slightly and there he was. He stood 30 feet away, frozen mid-conversation with 2 Japanese executives. His face had barely changed, still that aristocratic handsomeness, still that controlled expression that gave nothing away. But his eyes were locked on Caleb with an intensity that made Emilia's breath catch. Their gazes met across the room. For one suspended moment, time folded in on itself. She was 27 again, standing in his villa, believing his promises. He was 33 again, telling her they just needed to wait a little longer. Then the moment shattered. Sang-Kyu's wife, Yoon Ji-woo, now Do Ji-woo, appeared at his elbow, elegant in a cream Chanel suit. She followed her husband's gaze, and her polished smile froze when she saw Emilia and Caleb. Emilia turned back to her conversation as if nothing had happened. But her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. The confrontation came an hour later, in the gallery hallway outside the ballroom. Emilia was examining a contemporary art piece when she heard the footsteps behind her. "Emilia." His voice. God, his voice. Still the same deep timbre that used to say her name like a prayer. She turned slowly, deliberately. "Do Sang-Kyu. What a surprise. I didn't know you'd be here. Why would you? We haven't spoken in 8 years. Her voice was pleasant, conversational. Deadly. His composure cracked slightly. "You left without." "Without what?" "Without saying goodbye. You said goodbye for both of us that night. In front of 300 people. She smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. "How is married life treating you?" "Emilia, please." "Mr. Do." A group of Korean businessmen called out from down the hallway. Sang-Kyu's jaw tightened, but he was too well trained to ignore them. This conversation isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, Emilia replied. It is. She walked away before he could respond, her head high, her heart bleeding. Behind her, she heard him being pulled back into the crowd, back into his world of obligations and appearances. Caleb was exactly where she left him, sitting at their table with his tablet, completely absorbed in an educational game. She sat beside him and forced her breathing to steady. Mommy, you okay? Caleb looked up with those impossibly perceptive eyes. I'm perfect, baby. But she wasn't. Because across the ballroom, Du Jiwoo was staring at Caleb with the laser focus of a woman who recognized a threat when she saw one. The second night of the summit featured a charity gala. Emilia almost didn't attend, but Michelle convinced her it would look weak to hide. You're Emilia Benson, Michelle said firmly. You don't hide from anyone. So Emilia wore red, a bold, unapologetic crimson gown with a plunging back, and walked into that ballroom like a queen returning to reclaim her throne. The whispers started almost immediately. She caught fragments as she moved through the crowd. That's her? The one from Child looks exactly like. Can't be a coincidence. Du Jiwoo intercepted her before dinner service began. The woman's smile was plastic perfection, but her eyes were calculating and cold. Ms. Benson, I've heard so much about your impressive career. Mrs. Du, how kind of you to say. Emilia's smile matched hers, weapon for weapon. Your son is with you this evening? He's at the children's activity room. The summit organizers were thoughtful enough to provide one. He's a beautiful child. Jiwoo's voice was silk over steel. Quite distinctive features. Thank you. I think so too. How old is he? 7. The calculation was instant. Emilia watched Jiwoo's composure slip for just a microsecond, long enough to confirm that the woman knew exactly what that timing meant. I see. Jiwoo's smile sharpened. It must be difficult, raising a child alone. Not at all. I find it liberating. Emilia tilted her head. No compromises. No disappointing expectations. Just unconditional love. The barb hit its target. Jiwoo's perfectly applied foundation couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. Well, Jiwoo said tightly. I hope you enjoy the evening. She walked away with her dignity intact, but her armor dented. Emilia allowed herself a small, private smile. That was brutal. Emilia turned to find Sang-Kyu standing behind her, 2 champagne glasses in hand. He offered her one. She didn't take it. Your wife started it, Emilia said coolly. Jiwoo is protective of our family. How noble. Does that family include the son I'm raising alone? The champagne glass in his hand trembled. Is he? Don't. Emilia's voice cut like glass. Don't you dare ask me that question. You lost the right 8 years ago. I need to know. Why? So you can what? Claim him? Disrupt his life? Offer financial support 8 years too late. Emilia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a furious whisper. You made your choice, Sang-Kyu. You chose her. You chose your family's approval. You chose everything except me. It wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple. You stood on that platform and asked another woman to marry you while I was in the room. You knew I was there. You invited me. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Did you want me to see? Was that your way of ending things? Too cowardly to do it honestly, so you humiliated me publicly instead. No. God, Emilia, no. His composure shattered completely. My father threatened to dismantle everything. The company, my position, my entire legacy. He said if I didn't marry Jiwoo, he'd what? Cut you off? Make you build your own life. Emilia laughed bitterly. Other people do that every day. I did that. While pregnant. Alone. In a country that wasn't mine. Sang-Kyu looked like she'd struck him. You were pregnant when you left. It wasn't a question. Emilia didn't confirm or deny it. She just looked at him with eyes that held 8 years of survival. I waited for you to call, she said quietly. For weeks. I thought maybe you'd come after me. Explain. Fight for us. I was so stupid. I tried. No, you didn't. Because if you'd really tried, you would have found me. You're due, Sang-Kyu. You have resources I couldn't even imagine. If you'd wanted to find me, you would have. She picked up one of the champagne glasses from his hand. But you didn't want to. Because finding me would have meant choosing me. And you'd already made your choice. She drank the entire glass in one long swallow, set it down on a passing waiter's tray, and walked away. This time, he didn't try to follow. The final day of the summit was a private luncheon for select business leaders. Emilia almost declined until she learned Sang-Kyu wouldn't be attending. He and Jiwoo had an urgent family matter to attend to. She knew what that meant. They were scrambling to protect their reputation, trying to figure out if Caleb was really Sang-Kyu's son, and if so, what that meant for their pristine family image. Let them scramble, Emilia thought coldly. Let them feel one fraction of the chaos I felt. She was gathering her things to leave Seoul the next morning when her hotel room phone rang. Ms. Benson? There's a Mrs. Du here to see you. She says it's urgent. Emilia almost laughed. Of course. The final confrontation. Send her up. Jiwoo arrived 5 minutes later, and without her husband's presence, her mask was completely gone. She looked ragged around the edges, hair slightly disheveled, makeup fading, the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting a battle you're losing. Is he Sang-Kyu's son? Jiwoo asked without preamble. Emilia sat on the edge of her bed, legs crossed, utterly composed. Why does it matter? Don't play games with me. I need to know. You need to know? You need to know. Emilia stood slowly. You've had your perfect marriage for 8 years. You have the Du family name, the social standing, the wealth, the security. What I have is a son I raised alone. A career I built from nothing. And the knowledge that I survived something that should have broken me. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Emilia moved to the door and opened it. Caleb is my son. That's all that matters. If he's Sang-Kyu's biological, then what? You'll demand a DNA test? Take it to court? Drag my child through a media circus? Emilia's voice was sharp as a blade. Try it. I have lawyers who would bury you in litigation for years. I have resources you don't expect. And I have something you'll never have, a child who knows he's loved completely, not as a status symbol or a legacy obligation, but as himself. Jiwoo's composure cracked. You don't understand what you've done. The rumors are all ready. Let them talk. Let the entire world talk. I don't need the Du family's approval. I never did. Emilia stepped closer, her voice dropping. But let me give you some free advice. Mrs. Du, if you want to keep your marriage intact, stop looking for confirmation of what you already know. Because the truth won't set you free. It'll just prove that your husband's heart was never fully yours. Jiwoo left without another word, her designer heels clicking frantically down the hallway like she was running from a fire. Emilia closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She'd just declared war on one of Korea's most powerful families. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt free. The knock came an hour later. Softer this time. When Emilia opened the door, Sang-Kyu stood there alone, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked completely undone. His suit jacket was gone, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Is Caleb mine? His voice was raw. Emilia looked at him for a long moment. 8 years ago, she would have crumbled at that tone. 8 years ago, she would have thrown herself into his arms and sobbed out the truth. Now, she just felt tired. Come in, she said quietly. He stepped inside, and she closed the door. They stood in the hotel room, expensive, impersonal, nothing like the intimate spaces they'd once shared, and faced each other across an impossible distance. I need to know, Sang-Kyu said. Please. Why? What will you do with that information? Leave your wife? Claim him? Rewrite history? Emilia shook her head. Caleb has a life. A good life. He's happy, he's thriving, he's loved. What would the truth give him except chaos? He deserves to know his father. He deserves a father who chose him. Who fought for him? Who was there? Emilia's voice cracked. You weren't. And that's not entirely your fault, I never told you. But you also never came looking. You moved on with your life like I never existed. That's not true. Isn't it? Did you ever wonder what happened to me? Did you search? Or did you just let me disappear because it was easier? Sang-Kyu's silence was her answer. I thought so. Emilia wrapped her arms around herself. I loved you. I loved you so completely that I would have given up everything for you. But you couldn't do the same for me. And now you want to know if Caleb is yours so you can what? Ease your guilt? Play father on weekends. I want to know because his voice broke. Because if he's mine, then I've spent 8 years not knowing my own son. Not holding him, not teaching him, not being there when he needed me. And that's unbearable. For the first time, Emilia saw real anguish in his face. Not the controlled regret of a man managing a situation, but genuine grief. Look at me, she said softly. Really look at me. Do you see that scared girl who believed your promises? She's gone. I buried her in Chicago while I was mourning, sick and terrified. The woman standing here doesn't need your acknowledgement or your regret. She survived without you. I know. I can see that. Sang-Kyu's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're magnificent. You always were, but now, you're everything you were meant to become. And I hate that I'm not the one who got to see you become it. That was your choice. It was the worst choice I ever made. They stood in silence. The hotel room's air conditioning hummed softly. Outside, Seoul continued its endless motion, cars honking, people living, the world turning indifferent to their small tragedy. I'm not going to tell you if Caleb is yours, Emilia said finally. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't. But either way, he's mine. I'm the one who walked the floor with him at 3 a.m. I'm the one who taught him to read, who kissed his scraped knees, who showed up to every school event alone. I earned the right to decide what's best for him. And what is best for him? Peace. Stability. A mother who would burn the world down to protect him. She moved to the door again. Not a father who chose status over love and would teach him that's acceptable. Sang-Kyu flinched like she'd slapped him. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. I learned that when you proposed to another woman in front of me. Caleb won't have to learn it the way I did. He walked to the door slowly, like a man going to his execution. But he stopped at the threshold and turned back. If you ever change your mind, if he ever wants to know, I'll be there. No matter what it costs me. It would cost you everything, Emilia said quietly. I know. And I'd pay it. Because you were right, I didn't fight for you when I should have. I won't make that mistake again. He left. Emilia stood in the empty hotel room and finally let herself cry. Not the broken sobs of 8 years ago, but the quiet tears of a woman who'd survived something that should have destroyed her and came out stronger. Her phone buzzed. A text from the Children's Activity Center. Caleb is asking when you'll pick him up. He says he's ready to go home. Home. Chicago. Safety. The life they'd built together. Emilia wiped her tears, fixed her makeup, and went to get her son. When she arrived at the activity center, Caleb was sitting by himself, reading a book far too advanced for his age. He looked up when she entered, and his whole face brightened. Mommy! He ran to her, and she caught him in a fierce hug, breathing in his little boy scent, shampoo and sunshine, and something ineffably him. Ready to go home, baby? Yes. I finished the entire series. Can we get ice cream at the airport? Absolutely. As they walked out of the hotel, Caleb's hand in hers, Emilia didn't look back. Not at the building, not at the city, not at the life that almost was. She looked forward. Always forward. The taxi pulled away from the Grand Intercontinental, merging into Seoul's river of lights. Emilia didn't look back. Caleb leaned against her side, warm and solid and real, his small fingers wrapped trustingly around hers. Mommy, he asked softly, watching the city blur past the window. Are you happy now? Emilia looked down at her son, the child she carried through fear, exile, and rebirth. The child who had never once questioned her love. The child who was her greatest victory. Yes, she said, her voice steady. I really am. Because happiness wasn't the man who chose legacy over love. It wasn't the ring, the name, or the approval she was never meant to earn. Happiness was surviving betrayal, building a life from ruins, and raising a child who would never doubt his worth. As the taxi disappeared into the night, Sang-Kyu stood alone behind glass and power and regret, watching the only family he would never be allowed to claim slip permanently out of reach. Some losses come too late to fix. And some women don't return once they've learned how strong they are. If this story moved you, subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. Would you have told him the truth or protected your peace at all costs?